it is extremely unpolished.
Okay.
And in some cases, literally doesn't even work. I
my gosh.
bought the game on Steam, and I can't even like boot the game.
Okay.
It just crashes and doesn't work at all.
Well, there's a
So
problem.
in one sense, you might say it's broken. That can't be underrated. I won't like fight you on that necessarily,
Right.
but the game, when it does work,
Yeah.
is really unique. I would call it an underrated game. It deserves its bad scores, but it's good.
But it's good. That's interesting.
That's a truly underrated game in that sense.
That's a strange category right there. Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, we did a video titled something along the lines of, "Are you actually blinded by nostalgia?"
Yes.
And sort of teased this idea of maybe a small little mini series of the podcast where we would talk about particular gaming terms and their use in like gaming
yes.
conversations that I'm not a fan of.
Right.
Obviously, you're blinded by nostalgia was when we did in that episode.
Yep.
Though we did kind of lean into the term overrated quite a bit as well.
We did. That was brought up in the course of conversation.
Yeah, I really don't like the way that term is used. You might say the word overrated is overrated.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Absolutely right.
But no, I mean, like in all seriousness, it's just a blanket statement. It doesn't really say much. It's a qualitative statement without any attempt made to warrant that or justify it or vindicate that opinion.
Yeah.
It feels lazy to me. And though I feel similarly about today's term, it's not nearly as annoying.
It's just not as annoying. And I thought about why it isn't so annoying.
Yeah,
And I think I came up with something.
Okay.
I came up with something. Overrated is a critique. They're both critiques, but overrated is a critique meant to tear something down.
Yeah.
Whereas underrated is a critique meant to kind of build something up.
Yeah, bolster.
And while there are things that do need to be torn down, I typically err on the side of building as opposed to breaking, right?
Yeah.
And so if you, both words, we don't really use these words much, but given that overrated is a term that is used to tear something down, I would hope that people spend more time talking about things that they love instead of things that they hate.
Yeah.
And I would hope that by the end of your life, you know what a word cloud is? Where it's like a bunch of words. It's like a word frequency kind of list.
Oh, I
and
gotcha. Yeah.
the words that are said the most often kind of show up bigger, and then the smaller
Overrated
words
should not be one of the big words. in there.
Overrated should possibly not be on there. But if it is on there, I would hope it is smaller than the word underrated.
Yeah.
I think it is much more valuable to build something up and then to break something down. It's not always. This is just a rule, generally speaking. I would hope that you would spend your life supporting the things you love more than trying to tear down the things you hate.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, there's a little soft spot in my heart for underrated. I don't really feel so. Think about just the word, like there's an underdog in a movie or a show or a story or a football game. There's the underdog. Does anyone say overdog?
No.
Okay. I might be the first. I might have just coined a new word, you guys. The overdog, right?
The favorite is what they would usually use in that case.
Yeah, but it's the overdog, right? So there's a reason why stories focus a lot more on the underdog than on something like the overdog. It's more about the love for the underdog than the hate for the overdog, to the point where overdog isn't even used ever, except by me right now. And so, anyways, there's I feel like just, I don't know, Americans, well, probably everyone in the world, there's just the soft spot for the underdog. And so underrated, I understand it. And I sympathize with it too. I'm like, yeah, you go support that game that everyone hates that you like. You go get him, man. That's great. That's awesome. Go for it. Show people, stuff that you find valuable.
Yeah.
And there you go. I think that's my defense of the word underrated.
Well, for me, it's more about the total vagueness and just like lack of clarity with which a person expresses what their opinion is on something by simply
Yes,
throwing
yes.
out either one of these blanket
Either
terms.
one. They're both very
Now
vague.
it's more irritating for just the gall of someone usually going into a conversation made by people who are enjoying something and inserting themselves into it to call something overrated and start, a fight about it.
Yeah.
So,
or,
like,
or
that's-
not. They just lob the grenade into
And
the
then
room
leave.
and then leave. And then it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? We're trying to like talk about stuff here.
I mean, obviously, if I'm going to come in and like level critiques at something, particularly amongst a group of people who really like it, I would hope that I would attempt to make substantive arguments and like try to explain it in a way to where it can be understood. Okay, I see where you're coming from, and do so in a respectful way and whatnot.
And if
However,
the words overrated find their way into that explanation, so be it.
Yes,
but please provide an explanation.
but
give us a little more context
go
to your
further
Yeah.
than just it's overrated.
Yeah.
It sucks. This whatever. We're not talking about overrated today. We're talking about underrated.
We will talk about it one day.
So I try to. It's just like, what does it really mean when you're using that term underrated? Because I think a lot of people are really only using that to say this game isn't talked about enough, or
right.
not enough people are giving it the praise that I think it deserves, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's precise enough a term. I think that a game could be really, really highly, like literally highly rated. It's got great reviews and its aggregate score is really high, but maybe it just didn't sell a lot of copies.
I've got a couple on my list for
and
that.
and anyone who has literally played it talks about how great it is, but it's just not a big commercial success. I would not call that an underrated game.
I agree with
right?
you. I thought about, it took me a while to put this list together, because I was like, well, but what is rated
what's
about
the
it?
criteria?
Where's the rating?
Yeah.
Okay, but I just go to Metacritic and I'm like, okay, Outer Wilds. Oh, it turns out everyone freaking loves that game, even though it didn't sell gangbuster numbers. That's probably not overrated just because it didn't sell well. It was highly reviewed and critically acclaimed, and it won
Yes.
Game of the Year awards. And like, okay, probably not overrated, right?
No.
In that case.
No. So anyway, the way that I want to define it for these lists we've put together of some of our favorite
I said
underrated games.
sorry.
You said,
I should have said I should have said probably not underrated.
yes.
Yeah, not overrated.
I knew what you meant, but might as well clarify.
Yes.
So the way that I'm going to define this today for the list I've created is it's not just some really great game that sold poorly. That's a marketing issue. They didn't market their product well
That's a
enough
good
to
point.
have it sell.
If you've got a great
It's
game,
under-marketed.
yes. If you've got a great, that's right. It's under-marketed. Top 10 under-marketed games. We should do that at some
That's a different
point.
thing
Yeah.
than an underrated game.
Yes. If you
in
have
my
a great game that everyone loves, that wins Game of the Year awards, and that critics wrote good reviews about, yet it didn't sell well, you're right. The problem isn't the game or anything about it.
Yeah.
Or even the people who love it. The problem is more maybe on the business side.
Great example of this, something we talked about a little bit last week, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown.
Ah, okay.
Critically acclaimed, very, very good game that maybe not a lot of people played. Not an underrated game.
Right.
So that wouldn't qualify in this list we're putting together. For me,
Very nice.
an underrated game has to be not only something maybe that wasn't a mega seller. That's not the only criteria. You can have some games that are big sellers that are underrated.
I've got two.
But that's at least one consideration for me. It not being something a lot of people played and that maybe a lot of people don't talk about so much is one factor. But on top of that, I think it's also something that is possibly misunderstood. A movie that comes out that upon a release is like panned big time, but then is remembered in the long term as being something, you know what? Now that we've had more time to think about this and understand what it was trying to do, that's actually pretty great.
So Citizen Kane is the most underrated movie of all time, is what you're telling me.
Not now.
Well,
but
you're right.
at the time it came out, probably.
Yes, definitely.
And I think so that's another consideration, right? Is maybe like for one game that's on the list today, and I'll get to it in a minute. There's just one reviewer who bagged on this thing for a certain like control scheme and didn't understand he could have just changed that in the menu. And so then that problem wouldn't have existed. Yeah. And the guy gave it like a 3 out of 10 or something like that.
Jeeps.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's just misunderstanding the game.
Right.
That's literally being underrated. Right?
Yeah.
To me. So that's like another element of it. And then I guess third would be just there's not like in the popular consciousness, like a lot of people who really think about this when determining, what games are considered great and what games really moved, maybe had really stellar ideas or whatever, but it's just not a well-known thing because they weren't big sellers. They were misunderstood and panned a bit. People didn't give it a chance because it had lower reviews.
Yeah.
I think all of that needs to be in consideration when you talk about something being underrated.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Wow, underrated is actually an incredibly complex and nuanced term, as it turns out. Well,
it is specificity.
It is when we put our parameters around it.
You give some specificity to that term, then it kind of changes the context in which you use it, which is the whole point of us talking about these things.
And when you just throw the word out, we don't understand what you're talking about. Yeah, give us a little bit of guide rails there.
So we came up with some games. Yeah. I'm by no means trying to consider these like some kind of definitive list of like top 5 most underrated games. It's just a few games I thought of off the top of my head as we were thinking about this topic that I would like to throw out there as games that come to my mind. I think these are underrated games. I think they're pretty great. Most people don't think so.
Right.
Is kind of where I'm coming from. So
great. My definition might be a little different from the one you just laid out.
Okay.
But we'll get into that as the games, appear on my list.
All right.
So do you want me to start it off?
Why don't you go first?
Okay, well, I'm going to start it off here. That just first off, we're going to note that there is an asymptote to like the scaling of video game ratings, which means that no game will ever reach 100. It's impossible. You will keep getting closer and closer, but you're infinity away from 100. And by that technical definition, I have to say that The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, as a 99 on Metacritic, it is the highest rated Metacritic game of all time. It is severely underrated. It deserves that 100 mark, and it is infinity away from it. So the first game on my list is Ocarina of Time.
I'm guessing this is a joke pick.
That was mostly a joke, but
it's to illustrate.
But come on, people, why does no game have a 100? How come we don't all agree on just one game? And why can't we just make it this one? That's my question. And why is there always somebody that's going to come in and ruin it for everybody and say, nope, no one gets a perfect 10? That's actually how the Olympics work now. It used to be that the gymnasts would get like a perfect 10. Now they've got some complicated criteria where it's like a 9 point something. No one gets a 10 anymore. And it's just,
nothing in life is perfect.
It wounds me.
Nothing in life is perfect.
Yeah, but there's one thing that's the best thing. And let's just maybe what I'm saying, let's grade on a curve. Okay. Right? Whatever it is, just make it 100. That's 100. And then everything else kind of, falls in line underneath.
Okay, I get on board with that.
Now, what's funny enough, I didn't even say, was Ocarina of Time? No, it was on my top 10 list. Okay, so joke over. That's not an underrated game, in my opinion. Sold well, reviewed extremely well. The first game that I thought of when we talked about doing this was the game Golf Story. I had such a blast playing Golf Story. It's actually hard to explain. I grew up, the very first video game that I can remember playing, this was on a very, very old computer that my father used to have, and it only displayed in the color orange. Like, remember when we were going to school, there were some computers that were like blue,
my dad had
blue
one
and
too.
white.
It was orange,
an orange one?
Screen, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably better for your eyes. I don't even know if they cared about that back then.
Yeah.
But it was orange and black.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. Mm-hmm. And there was a free game my dad got at a Buick dealership, and it was golf. It was a golf game, and it was Buick Open.
Dude,
golf.
I might have played the same game.
Really?
I think so.
I wonder if it was like a free...
yeah.
Because remember Chex Quest? We got it in your Chex cereal. It came with like a game called Chex, which was Doom, basically, except with Chex.
Right.
And I played that game like crazy. I loved Chex Quest. In fact, that might be the second most underrated game ever. But the Buick Open game of golf was, okay, I don't know if it was the first, but it was among the first games that I ever played. And I had a blast. I like the whole concept of like moving the scale left and right and to measure your power, and it's all about timing. Because at first I was like, how do you play golf on a computer? This doesn't really make sense. And then I see the thing go back and forth. I'm like, oh, you've got to like match it in the middle and then do the full power and switch your clubs. I learned all about golf from playing that game, right? So as different games came out, like Mario Golf or any different kind of golf sims, I just love them. I really like them. I got quite good at them too.
Fun. Yeah.
We got to measure for the wind, and you've got to pick the right club, and you've got to hit it just the right amount. Like it's a very what do you say it? Like small changes have big effects when you're hitting a ball 400 yards. You know, like boom. Right. And so because of that, I just grew up loving to play golf on a computer, and I loved to kind of get into when the Wii came out though, and it was all about the motion controls. Right. That has its value too, I guess, but it wasn't as fun. I would much rather just do the timing and catch everything just right, and then boom, see what happens. Teaches you about physics too. It's just really fun, and then the different materials if you're in the rough or if you're in the green or if you're in the bunker, just super fun stuff. So Golf Story comes out. And I'm thinking like a pixelated, like a golf remake, basically, of like all the fun golf games out there. It didn't look that fun to me, except for the story elements of it that really caught my attention. And at the time, the level where you save the village from a zombie invasion by hitting golf balls at the zombies, that sold me. It sold me. Golf Story was a life-changing game for me. Very fun. And it kind of opened my mind to the ideas of telling stories within mundane activities that wouldn't be considered exciting in and of themselves, and making a really engaging, super fun story out of it. It's a little campy too, where it's like, you'll never make it. Oh yeah. And then he gets like a trainer, and okay, I've got to show my girlfriend that I'm worth stuff and that I'm not just wasting my life away. It's very like Rocky-esque or something like that. It's campy. The intro is, which I just loved, because it's like, okay, there's a little bit, let's get into the game now. But there's depth to the game, and it's a fun game, and it's a funny game.
It's awesome.
And the pixel art is amazing.
Golf Story, I ended up playing it after you recommended it, and I legitimately just loved it. It's really good.
Unfortunately, the sequel Sports Story doesn't seem, I have not yet played it, but it may not have risen to the heights of Golf Story. But just like the different places and the way that you're helping people using your golf skills is just unbelievably creative. It was a blast. Golf Story is one of the most underrated games of all time.
I loved Golf Story. Now, somebody put into the chat here, Rada Yada Stories. Another game that I really, really like. It's very, very funny.
I didn't.
But this is where I challenge how we're defining underrated.
Is it highly rated?
I have literally never heard anyone say anything bad about Rada Yada Stories.
Interesting.
Ever. It's literally everyone who ever talks about it talks about how great it is.
The critique is just not enough people talk about it.
It's the slept on.
Yeah, slept on. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
I would argue that a game being slept on is not underrated. It's just
undervalued?
Slept on, which is a different thing.
Okay.
It's just not as well known or as talked about as you would like. But everyone who plays it loves it. That's not underrated to me.
Okay.
So that's I'm just clarifying again, getting real specific with the terminology here. So Rada Yada Stories is awesome. I just want to put that out there. I actually did a video on it, and for the longest time, it was one of the only videos we've ever produced that literally had a 100% like to dislike ratio, even with like more than 10,000 views.
That's interesting.
Which is unheard of.
That's unusual.
That's what I'm also using to qualify the fact.
Hey, it's
I
a perfect 10.
don't think this game is underrated.
Okay.
I think everyone loves it, is what I'm trying to say.
Sense. And then I see people saying that Golf Story was well received on release. It's true. I did hear about it through that. It has a 78 on Metacritic, which in my opinion that's just too low of a number.
Yeah, 78's pretty low.
Just a little too low. If 99 is too low for Ocarina of Time, 78 can be too low for Golf Story.
I guess I'll clarify that first too. I did look up Metacritic scores for
Me
most
too.
of these.
Just to make sure I wasn't, you know.
To make sure that I wasn't putting something on there that's like
Yeah.
a 9 or above. Most of these hang around like either 80 or some get as low as like 73. The highest one that I have on here is an 84, which is not a bad score.
No, yeah, it's
But I
respectable.
really just think it deserves to be a 9 or above. Like, that's how good I think it is.
Totally fine. I have a game here that's above a 90,
Okay.
but I will qualify it when we get there.
All right. So the first one that I decided to talk about was Red Steel 2. So Red Steel was a launch
I remember Red
title
Steel.
for the Wii.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was marketed as this game that was going to use the Wii remote for it's a first-person shooter that also incorporates some samurai like sword play and things like that.
Like Kill Bill-esque kind of.
And the setting for the first game is kind of this like Yakuza modern sort of thing where your girlfriend gets like kidnapped, fiance, I think she's fiance, is sort of like kidnapped by the mafia, by the Yakuza, and you're fighting against these mafia dudes. And so, you know, you have your gunplay sections where you're shooting guys up, and then you have your sword play sections. They're separate things.
Yeah, the trailer for this game was really cool. Like, I really wanted to play this game.
It had a lot of hype behind it, and it was really rough. Again, as a launch title on the Wii, I think the Wii, the more I think about the console itself, it's almost like it was a couple years ahead of when it was really ready as a concept to come out.
I think so.
Because it didn't really come into its own for me until the Wii Motion Plus attachment was released.
Yeah.
Then it actually started living up to its promise.
That's true of a lot of Wii games.
Yes.
It's like, wait until you get that thing, and then you can actually play the game.
Yeah. And
well, here's another thing too, though. The Wii Motion Plus add-on that came with like the sleeve and stuff.
Yeah.
It elongated the controller too, which is really fun for sword stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, the Wii kind of got this reputation because it was a big success, like right away, mostly because of Wii Sports.
Bowling and golf.
A bunch of, you know, casual people who were not really gamers were like, oh, this seems cool. Let's try this as a novelty for holidays or something like that, and then we'll never touch the thing again. But like, you know, people who really get into games, it became sort of termed a waggle mote. You know, it's just you just shake the thing around to do stuff. And this is largely due to developers being lazy with it too. But when the Wii Motion Plus attachment came out, you started to see first-person shooters in particular start to really become a lot better in terms of their controls. Because like in Red Steel, you watch anyone playing this game, watch some gameplay footage, you're turning and the guy's gun is just like moving from side to side, like trying to turn the character, right?
That's so funny, man.
And it just looks so silly.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't really figured out, you know, the whole dead zone thing.
Yeah.
Where like within a certain range of the screen, it aims, but outside of that range, it now turns the character. And so they came up with solutions to the problems that clearly they had for Red Steel 1.
Yeah.
And Red Steel 2 is a perfect example of that. Not only that, Red Steel, although it was not highly reviewed, also it also did sell really quite well. But I think it had already damaged its reputation enough amongst those buyers that when the second one came out, it sold really poorly. But it was an excellent game.
Really?
An excellent game. It totally reboots its whole like setting. This is not like in the real world. Like we're not in Japan and LA like the first game. This is like some make-believe world, and you know have these dueling clans, and this guy left his clan for a while, came back, it's been taken over by another clan. It's like a cel-shaded, super stylized look versus sort of the pseudo-realism of the first game. And you can choose between gunplay and swordplay seamlessly. You can go back and forth between them whenever you want.
Yeah, nice.
The inputs are incredibly precise, so there's no like, oh, I did this, but it didn't work, which was also another complaint a lot of players had about. You had to do these really precise kind of movements, and if you didn't, then I would rather just had to be a button. That's not the case with this game. They went through great lengths to make sure their players were tutorialized appropriately, understood how to pull off the combos, and then pulling them off wasn't difficult in terms of the precision of the movement. You get the general gist of the move, it's gonna work. And it was just a super well-designed game. The music is great. I think it's very visually stylish, and it is a ton of fun to switch back and forth between fighting with the gun and then going into the sword. And there's all kinds of really cool, almost anime-like moves and energy blasts from the sword and shooting guys up in the air and jumping up there and knocking them back down again.
That's always fun.
It's a super fun game that I think a lot of people didn't give a chance due to the bad reputation of the first. But even in the, as far as the critic ratings go, I think it was an 80.
Okay.
And I think that while that's not necessarily a bad score, I think it's a better game than that. I really do. I think it's at least an 8.5, maybe pushing a 9. And everyone should try it because it's actually a lot of fun. I think it's a great game. So
Red Steel 2.
Red Steel 2, check it out. It's
nice.
actually really good.
Well, I brought along a little action figure here.
Oh, shoot.
This is my friend Roxas. He's a nobody. Kingdom Hearts, 358 over 2 days. Now, when we decided to do this episode, the criteria that you laid out at the beginning of this video is not exactly the criteria that I used. In fact, the criteria that I used...
That's just more evidence to the fact that the term is not a well-defined term.
It's just not. It's just not. Here, I'm going to put him here. There you go. People can see him. So 358 over 2 days. As Kingdom Hearts games go, it is not one of the... I don't know. It's not one of the mainline entries, right?
Yeah.
It sort of flew under the radar. But it's the most interesting one. I think it's the best Kingdom Hearts game. Maybe, okay, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 are amazing.
In this respect, I actually do agree this is an underrated game. I actually really do.
I actually didn't look up the rating. I didn't. But I believe it is an underrated game. 358 over 2 days introduces the really... you get to dive deep into the concept of a nobody and what it means to be a nobody within the game, right? Yeah. And what that means. It introduces you to characters like Axel and maybe Xion and a few others. And there's a really cool climax at the end of the game where it all kind of comes to a head in that city, right? It's crazy. It's a really cool ending of the game. But the moments, 358 over 2 days delivers really touching moments. And is quite a profound game as well. A la, maybe I don't want to spoil a ton, but there's some maybe VV-ish elements here with the nobodies.
Sure.
In how they're created and what their life means and what purpose they might have. And there's maybe there's some encroaching nihilism that's happening there too that they're trying to deal with. And what does it mean to be a nobody? And what does it mean to be nobody, right?
Yeah.
To exist but not exist. They have this strange existence. And just that theme right there is a very interesting theme to explore. And the game isn't really talked about a ton. Maybe amongst Kingdom Hearts people it is.
But I mean,
and it was
even
a DS
among
game.
Kingdom Hearts fans, it's not a well-liked
I don't
entry.
think
and I
so.
think it's mostly because its gameplay is a bit limited in comparison to, like, say, the PSP game and some of the others that came out around
because this was a DS game, I believe. Right?
Yes, it was.
And you're right. The graphical capabilities are low, and I was very confused playing the game. How come there's nobody in any of the villages? Yeah. Well, the DS couldn't render too many polygons.
That's exactly it.
They couldn't have that many characters there, right? So everywhere I went, I was like, this place is freaking empty, right? This is an empty place. And then they're talking about it. Oh, and I was thinking we were just going to these desolate cities, and it turns out no, they were. They're normal places. It just seems desolate because of the game. Okay, limitations of the DS. That's fine. Other than that kind of strange-ish aspect to the game. And the battling is a little different in that one. Same thing with Chain of Memories, which came up before it, which also has a very interesting story where the characters are kind of, as they progress through this dungeon, they're forgetting everything that they used to know in the past as they're coming towards the end. But the battle system was like a card-based battle system, which just kind of ruined the game for a lot of people. But 358 over 2 days at least does have some fun combat. But the story is so interesting, and the characters, and more specifically the moments, right? When they're sitting together at the top of that clock tower, eating ice cream.
Yeah.
You don't even need to say anything, right?
Yeah.
They're just there. It's a touching moment. They often, after missions or after, certain important things will happen in the story, they may not even get along that well at the moment because they have these disagreements, but they're going to meet each other up on that clock tower later to watch the sunset. And like, there's a vicarious experience that game gave me of just like what it's like to have a friend, even in the weirdest of circumstances, and to try to just make the best of what you do have, even when you don't know when it's going to end.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it many times. I'm not a huge Kingdom Hearts fan, but I do like that game.
It's really good.
I like the first game, and I like that one. And it's primarily because of those exact moments you're talking about. I think they really hit on something pretty special with the whole like building up your attachment to those three characters that are up there
Axel,
eating ice cream together
Roxas and Xion,
every day after their missions are done for 358 days or whatever.
Yeah, 358 over 2 days, which I still don't quite know what that means. But also, and then every now and then there's a moment where one of them didn't make it.
Yeah.
And you like, feels like a part of your heart is missing. It's like, oh man, where's the game? Where's everybody?
They really hit on something like deep emotionally with that one that some of the others have not for me. And it's unfortunate that like when it gets put into the sort of those compilation, they release remix of the remixes, I think they're called.
Remix,
yeah. Like the game's not on it. It's just like
just a movie.
The movie scenes, which
it's unfortunate.
I understand why. But like, it's just like it's almost relegated at this point to just being like a movie you watch rather than it being its own like solid standalone Kingdom Hearts game. So yeah, I definitely I can agree on this one being an underrated game for sure.
And by the way, I think I mentioned this in our Metal Gear Solid episode, but the voice of Axel is the guy who voices Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2.
Yeah.
Just a fun little. I'm having fun playing Metal Gear Solid 2 right now.
Oh, totally.
That game's so underrated.
Great one's putting Deadly Premonition.
Oh, I remember that game.
That's
I never played
an underrated game.
I never played it.
That's
I've heard
an
a lot
underrated
about it.
game.
Huh.
I'm 100% on board with that one being considered underrated. But it's not
the director's cut.
But it's got a weird caveat to it.
Yeah.
It is extremely unpolished.
Okay.
And in some cases, literally doesn't even work. I bought the game on Steam, and I can't even like boot the game.
Okay.
It just crashes and doesn't work at all. So in one sense, you might say it's broken. That can't be underrated. I won't like fight you on that necessarily. But the game, when it does work, is really unique and really, really. It's like Twin Peaksy. So
I see.
It's got like that just unsettling strangeness, and it's just doing something that nothing else is trying to do.
Wow.
And the things that it tries to do in terms of like whatever trends it might follow, it does badly. Like its gunplay is not good. It's like car driving system is not good.
Yeah.
And it's very unpolished. But there's a lot more to it than just like those things. And I would call it an underrated game, but not, it deserves its bad scores, but it's good.
But it's good. That's interesting.
That's a truly underrated game in that sense.
That's a strange category right there. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this one, I'm actually not really sure what like people in general, like what do the people say in terms of this game? I saw the review scores and I felt it was a little low, but I don't know what people think. So like maybe people really value this, and this might undo my own argument about defining what underrated means. But I just played it a bit with my wife. Not a bit. I played it a lot. Because she was interested in it. I basically, we've been trying to find stuff that, like she would be into, so she can try to start understanding a little bit like why I like games so much. And so we picked this one because it's kind of got like a Pixar cute kind of art style to it. It's a very beautiful game visually. It's Kena Bridge of Spirits.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was a launch title for the PlayStation 5. And so I went into this fully expecting it to be a kid-friendly game that, probably be pretty easy, probably a good thing for someone with very little experience playing video games to try out and to learn how to play them.
Right.
And that was a mistake.
Oh,
I tell you what.
Oh, no.
This game is hardcore difficult.
Wow.
Really,
Okay.
really tough. In a good way for me, probably in a bad way for someone who's like picking it up as one of the first games really that they've ever tried playing before.
Okay. It's like do Mario World first or something.
Yeah, definitely start with something less difficult than this. In terms of bosses, the bosses are really hard. Now, the Souls comparison is way overdone.
Yeah.
Way overdone.
Well,
way
it
overrated.
was like 10 years ago. It's overrated.
It's an overrated comparison.
Oh, geez, man.
People do it way too much.
There should be a website that rates comparisons. We should make one.
I don't want to compare it to Souls because it doesn't play anything like Souls.
Okay.
But in the aspect of the bosses are that hard, it's comparable. Like you have to fight this boss, and I think there's 4 difficulty levels. So I picked the third, not the highest, not like the very highest difficulty. I picked the third, figuring I know that this isn't really going to be that hard, right? And
little did you know.
My goodness, it was brutal. So
what if you just drop it to the first one? Is it?
It's definitely like the story mode is definitely a lot easier, but
Yeah.
it's still not something that I think like a first time person who's going to struggle even just with the right stick, right? Like they're not going to be able to really even without being really frustrated because there's platforming and there's all kinds of stuff. You got to use your camera correctly to be successful, right?
Yes.
So there's probably other games that would be better starter packs for like a brand new game player. But it's not just that it's hard. It's just really, really good. They're really well designed fights.
Oh, that's cool.
And the difficulty is very satisfying. I just wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
So like once I hit that first boss and was just like, holy crap, how have I died to this thing like 20 times? This is crazy. Then I'm going into the next ones expecting that difficulty and I'm getting more and more satisfaction out of defeating them. And it's just like a really, really well-made game. Like as a whole. I do think that in one aspect, maybe some of its collectibles could give you better rewards, right? Like a lot of the things you unlock or like the challenges you complete or the things you find are really just more like aesthetic. It's like you get hats for your little, they're called rots. They're like the little dudes that come with you and give you powers. You get like hats for them, but they don't really do anything. So in that sense, I think is like the one critique I have of the game. But outside of that, I think it's a really, really good game, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it, and I certainly didn't because I had no idea it was going to be this challenging of a game. Like, I hadn't heard that because people don't talk about this game.
Because it's underrated.
Yeah, because it's an underrated game.
Very good.
It's an underrated game. It's very good. People should try it out.
Dope. All right, guys. I talked a little bit about Splatoon on my top 10 video. And I want to talk a little bit more about it because Splatoon is probably not on anyone else in the whole world's top 10 list, but it's on mine. Okay, it could be on some other people's. That might have been a little too hyperbolic. But Splatoon, the system, the way that they took what is typically just a like third-person shooter type of game, right? Team-based, kill the enemy. Sometimes there's a capture the flag mode. Right. Okay. King of the Hill. Like there's different modes, like in Halo. There's different ways you can make it fun, but you're just kind of going around like killing each other. And the way that Nintendo took that concept and put a really creative twist to it in order to make a game that is so unbelievably captivating. I still can't believe Splatoon even exists, right? They took this concept, and what was kind of funny? Back when Nintendo was developing Splatoon, Shigeru Miyamoto was somewhat involved on like an oversight basis of just like, here are the projects. And it wasn't actually coming together that well. They didn't know they had the core concept of like what they were going to do, like the way that the squids swim in the ink or whatever. But they didn't know what characters to make. They didn't know how to brand the game at all. And Miyamoto said, look, you're not going to miss that release date. So if you don't come up with something, it's going to be a Mario game. We're just going to put the Mario characters in it, and then it'll be just them doing the thing. I don't know how the game would have looked if that were to have happened.
That would have been a shame.
I'm so glad that that didn't happen. And I think that they knew that they had something once that decision was made. Oh, we're not making this a Mario game. This is going to be its own new thing. And Nintendo hasn't produced a ton of brand new IPs lately. Like there's some, but for the most part, they're living on the glory days of older, IP. But Splatoon just kind of came out of nowhere. And people could tell, too, with that E3 where it was announced. People were just like, this game looks wild. I've never seen anything like it before. The way you can use a sniper rifle to, like, lay down ink so that you can, like, zoom all the way to the end and then shoot another. You can only move in your ink, like, super fast. It's a super brilliant and very creative concept that... And it's very accessible to even gamers who don't play games that often, such as your wife. But unfortunately, I have played Splatoon 2 and the subsequent games after it. They aren't exactly as magical as that first one. The first one, and a lot of it had to do with the Wii U, because you would use the map. You would use the screen on your Wii U
needed that second screen
in order to like spawn to different places, or you can choose where you're going to go. You can spawn 2 people wherever they are on the map. And the main multiplayer mode of the game was something along the lines of like a King of the Hill, kind of who can control this zone the longest, right? And everyone's going to come and try to take it from you. And the other games don't have that screen as much, but they also have added new modes. They've changed it. They've kind of done a little bit too much with it. I love the simplicity of the first one. And Splatoon sold really well. It's a high IP. People liked it a lot. But it's not on anyone's top 10 list. And that's why it's underrated. The reason why I am shifting criteria for each game and a different, because honestly, I don't know that I can really even say what underrated means, other than there's something out there that you feel like needs more support for more people to see it, to be aware of it.
Yeah.
That's the slept on thing. But like, oh, hey, I'm going to help build this thing up. It deserves to be, the building in which it resides deserves to be a little taller, is more or less it, right?
Sure.
And in that case, I think Splatoon deserves that.
Okay. My next one, I put Epic Mickey.
So I have that game now.
Do you?
Yes, the brand new Switch remake,
rebrushed remaster version.
Yeah, we got it.
We actually have
Christmas.
someone in this chat right now, or at least he was here, who will probably argue with me on this because I've seen many critiques.
On the remaster?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it ends up coming in. But no, I have literally never understood the sort of, I don't know, like the widespread panning or just dismissing of this game.
Yeah.
So it was developed by Warren Spector. He's sort of a legendary game developer. He's like the guy who made Deus Ex.
Oh yeah.
He worked at, I think it's what was it? Looking Glass Studios.
Okay.
Who worked on System Shock.
Okay, yeah.
And Thief the Dark Project, Ultima Underworld, and other games like that. So
cool. He's
like a super well-respected game developer. And he decided to take on this Epic Mickey project, which is obviously a Disney game. And there's some really, really interesting things about this that I think drew me into it. One, 3D platformers in the vein of some of the ones that we grew up with and loved, like Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah.
When they were kind of at their heyday, they've sort of fallen off. Like you don't see them as much anymore, and when you do, they're usually not that great. Astrobot is a recent example of a resurgence, and a really, really good one. That one game of the year.
They kind of shifted back into the 2D mode.
For a while, it was like
Donkey Kong went back to 2D, Mario
side-scrolling and stuff like that. But like a truly like sort of open 3D platformer. And so just conceptually, I found it very interesting. I think I remember talking with you about this a little bit back in the day, where there's a very, very similar comparison here to how I feel like Mario has been handled by Nintendo, just as a character, as a brand representative to Mickey Mouse for Disney.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse started as this mischievous, almost like kind of like almost irritating. You know, a lot of those Looney Tunes characters were the same. Like Bugs Bunny's like an a-hole, dude.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
He's just like
just screwing around with people.
He's just screwing with people all the time.
So is the Roadrunner.
Yeah. But like Mickey Mouse also was like that, like in his original concept.
Yeah, he was purposefully annoying, kind of.
As like the years went on, he became the brand ambassador as a character of the Disney Corporation, and became more and more and more and more clean, like respectable, like and just sort of like this image of like a wholesome, good, like always does the right thing kind of character, right?
Yeah. And it's also why they haven't produced a ton of IP around Mickey Mouse lately.
Yes.
Nintendo's actually kind of, well, first off, the IP, I think there was an expiration date that finally passed with the Steamboat Willie, the copyright.
To go into the public domain.
It's now Steamboat Willie Mickey is now public domain. Now we'll see about the other Mickey stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, Disney actually kind of doesn't love the image that Mickey Mouse helped them craft anymore.
Well, that's the
way
weird
that they
thing,
did up until about 10, 15 years ago.
Because I was looking into this, and apparently, where did I put it? This was an effort on the part of Disney to rebrand Mickey Mouse as a character by placing less emphasis on his pleasant, cheerful side and reintroducing the more mischievous and adventurous side of his personality, depicting him as an epic hero.
Is this why people didn't like it as much? I
don't think this is why. This is why I like it, though. I don't think people consider this really when thinking about this game. They think more about its technical platforming or like controls being clunky or not or whatever.
Okay.
Right? Like they're more focused on that. And I'm more focused on conceptually what interests me about this particular depiction of Mickey Mouse and Disney properties in this sort of like darker, more mischievous way.
Yeah.
It's still very kid friendly. It's not like dark, but it's the closest you're going to get to like a dark Mickey Mouse type of thing.
That's fascinating. That was one of the appeals of Kingdom Hearts, actually, is that Mickey Mouse has this very mysterious aspect to him, and he's wearing the nobody cloak, and there's something very mysterious about him.
Yeah. So I remember talking to you about I want them to try like a dark Mario game, right?
Yes.
Like, and what I meant by that was something more not like truly dark, not like rated M Mario.
Just like cool.
Just something that like makes the character not this squeaky clean, you know, caricature that they've made him out to be. And we've talked about this in other episodes too. Like Mario had a real different look art-wise through the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And then right when Satoru Iwata took over at Nintendo, they basically locked in a brand image for Mario, and they've never deviated from it since.
Not until the movie. That just
I guess
came out
that's true. The movie,
recently.
he looks a little different.
He looks different, and his actions, well, it's a movie.
I haven't seen the movie.
Yeah. You should check it out. It's fascinating.
In any case, it's kind of something I had been asking from Mario. Like, let's get away from this image we've made for him. Let's do something different with that character. Maybe take him to his roots a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this does. So, like, the story's really funny because Mickey Mouse is like sleeping in his house or whatever, and like he wakes up and he walks up to his bedroom mirror, and it acts up. It just kind of mysteriously, you know, maybe a fate sort of assigned to it, like draws him in to the world of Yen Sid as he's like creating essentially a world for forgotten things. So these are forgotten Disney properties, like Oswald the Rabbit, who Disney didn't even have the rights to because that character was, if I remember correctly, that was his original character, and it was sort of like stolen.
Mickey?
No, Oswald the Rabbit, and he couldn't. It was like it was a kind of a stolen property by Universal or something like that.
Oh, that's funny.
And Disney was pissed, and then he went and made Mickey Mouse after that as like a response to the fact that he couldn't use that character that he had made. So it wasn't until like 2006 that Oswald was finally like reclaimed by Disney, which is what allowed them to put him into this game. So Mickey Mouse and Oswald the Rabbit actually interact. Their characters in the game. Fun. So it's really, really cool. So Jens Sid is creating literally a world for forgotten things like that.
Cool.
And Mickey steps in very similarly to Fantasia, and he uses the magic paintbrush and he starts messing it up. He creates this blight, this I think they call it blot, that is like a plague that ends up like corrupting
spreading,
the thing and he did it on accident, didn't know what he was doing, like, crap.
Oh, that harkens back to Fantasia
exactly,
a little bit. Yeah,
exactly.
That's fun. Yeah.
So Jens Sid comes back, oh no, the creation is ruined, and Mickey Mouse runs away, but like years, I don't know if it's years or just a long time later, he ends up getting pulled back in through that mirror and into the world, and he's got to go clean up his mess.
Because everything's black and white, is that it?
It's not black and white, it's just corrupted by this blot.
Okay.
And Mickey uses a magic paintbrush to either use thinner to like erase things like enemies in his past, or paint to bring things back that have been erased.
That's pretty fun.
So you're going around and you're restoring things with the paintbrush, or in your platforming, there's like you need something here to jump onto, so you paint it with the brush, and then you can jump, or you're using the paint thinner to like erase blot or erase things like that. So I really, really like it conceptually a lot. Even like the world is designed very much like Disneyland in terms of its layout, where like you have your hub world, and then you go into the separate levels, almost like you're going into the separate lands of Disneyland or something like that, right?
That's fun.
But it's using, or reusing, I should say, a lot of really old, forgotten Disney characters and properties. And so it's done a lot more in that style of Steamboat Willie. And even Mickey's design is Steamboat Willie Mickey, not like his current form. Right. And I don't know, it just had a really charming atmosphere, which, and Warren Spector, he's really known for his like use of choice in games, choice and consequence.
Okay.
The player is meant to make a lot of choices. That plays an effect in this, depending on who you choose to erase or who you choose to restore. And so like that's an element to it I really liked. And I think it's a really well made, a solid platformer aside from that. It's got variety to it. There are some side-scrolling sections, and there's all these different levels that I just think are really beautiful and kind of call back to a lot of these parts of Disney's past that a lot of people don't remember or don't even know. And it's got its look and feel rooted way back in this way that works really well with kind of this darker feel and adventurous kind of feel to it, rather than, again, that squeaky clean Mickey Mouse that they have as their brand ambassador now. So I love the game. I think it's great. And it had a 73.
Oh,
Metacritic,
really?
Which it does not deserve. It deserves higher than that for sure.
Well, I will find out. I'll probably be playing it at some point with my kids.
Yeah, I think it's a great game to play with kids if you got kids.
On the topic of, I've thought about this for a while with like Zelda or Mario or Mickey Mouse or any of this stuff, how at some point it would be sweet, because I felt the same way, especially after I played Mario RPG. I was like, oh man, we got to have some like dark kids dark, like Shadow the Hedgehog dark, Mario game or something like that. And I know why they're reticent to do it. Like there is obviously a big economic factor there, but even if it would make money, it might alienate the younger audience, which is always the one they're going for. And so the idea to subvert your own IP is, executives are always going to veto that unless they have some data that shows, hey, look, kids don't play our games anymore. Our audience is all in the 30s. They don't want a fifth game the exact same way. They want it to be different, and they're older now. And then it's like, okay, now we'll start messing with things. But if like Mickey Mouse is 100 years old and they're still primarily being consumed by like 10-year-olds, if you decide to do a new version of it that's like dark, well, then the new 10-year-olds, that's going to be their Mickey Mouse. And that's not what 10-year-olds are into. Anyways, there's a whole, I've thought about this, but Disney has shown a willingness to subvert their own properties in recent years.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's paid off for them. I don't think it's gone well. In fact, they got Star Wars and immediately started subverting it.
Yeah.
And they have now subverted, like with like Snow White and a lot of their new movies that they're making now. They're trying to subvert their own self. They're trying to rewrite their own history. They're trying to create a different image that's not squeaky clean. And I just don't think it's going very well for them.
I think
it could be that they've
a
decided their
difference-
audience is older now.
There's a difference between subverting what it was and restoring it to what it was.
That's
And
interesting.
I would
That's
say
a good
that
point,
Epic
actually.
Mickey is more about like
Steamboat.
presenting Mickey Mouse as he originally was,
Well, that's a good point then. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
not in necessarily subverting what he is now.
So it's not like whatever else Disney's been doing lately. but in this particular case, it's, let's reintroduce young
Yeah.
people to Steamboat Willie Mickey
Yes.
and see what they think.
Yeah.
That's cool. I can get behind that a little bit more.
And I mean, this is an outside studio hired by probably
Right,
Disney to
right.
make it, not necessarily Disney Interactive making it
I
themselves.
remember I was trying to show my kids some Mickey Mouse stuff, and I'm like, they haven't made like a Mickey Mouse movie in decades. It's been a long time. And I think that they have created such a high pedestal for that character
I know.
that it's unattainable and that they don't know how to do it, especially not anymore.
That's
They
a
really don't know what to do with Mickey anymore.
Big part of the reason why I like this so much.
Yeah.
It's like one of the few times the
So
character
they branched
even
out.
is used in anything. And they did something admittedly kind of risky with it. But like, again, but I don't even know if it's necessarily risky. That might not be the right word, but just not expected. It's not how you tend to expect to see that character portrayed.
Yeah. Which is fun.
But it is going back to literally its roots.
That's cool.
And
That's cool.
I
can
really,
respect
really,
that.
really liked that.
Yeah, I can respect that.
All right.
So this is another fun one. I guarantee you that this is for sure underrated upon all measures. On all accounts, this is an underrated game. And it is a game that we did a podcast on. And we were so just flabbergasted that this is a good game. This is a good game.
Yeah.
How come no one ever told me this is a good game? Even people who like this game, we're making apologies for it. Xenosaga 2.
Episode
It's
2.
a really, really good game.
Yeah.
It's fun. There's so much about it that I absolutely love. There are some things about it that people always have to point to that, okay, I agree. Some of the artistic decisions were a little bit different. There are some changes between from the first one to the second one. It had, I think, a different director, right? It's a shorter game just in general. It maybe gets a little bit muddled at certain parts when telling its linear story, right? The way that it tells it. However, this game's good. The combat is actually fun. The premise is really interesting. And the moments, the deep emotional moments of this game, they hit really hard.
Yeah,
they're really good. In fact, Xenosaga 2 might have the most impressive and meaningful and interesting sequence amongst all three games, or the Pied Piper and all the sequels are a missing year. Of all the other content, Xenosaga 2 might have the most meaningful and interesting and important sequence within any of those games. And it's the one that everyone always kind of like, yeah, well, you just got to beat it to play the third one, The third one's great. I'm not saying anything bad about Xenosaga 3. Awesome. Great game. But Xenosaga 2, I was not expecting it to be as good of a game as it ended up being.
Yeah.
It is a good game. It is fun to play. The story is really good, and it's deep. It's deep.
Yeah.
And it was fun. I was utterly shocked. And I think that's the title of the podcast, episode 1. It's like, wait, this game's good. How come nobody told me this game's a good game?
Yeah, I basically only heard bad stuff about it.
Me too.
Before we ended up playing it, I figured it was going to be one of those games we just got to get through it.
And it didn't sell as well.
I
and all
actually
that.
really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. So
much fun.
It's definitely underrated. I would agree with that.
And if you know the development history, you know that Xenosaga 2 does have some problems, but the way that it handles those problems is actually quite good, in my opinion. And I know that maybe Xenosaga 2 was supposed to be like 1 and 2. It's supposed to be, but they couldn't finish 1, so then 2 is almost feels like, well, it's not an
like
afterthought.
The ending
but
of 1.
Yeah, it's like, it's an incomplete kind of like middle and ending of a thing. It doesn't feel that way at all. Yeah. Like it feels like I know it picks off like right as 1 ends, of course. And we did play 1. I don't know. It was like a year between playing 1 to 2.
It was a while.
But it was enough time to where, but I was able to just hop right back into it.
Yeah.
And okay, no, there were, I do remember now the opening, like, speech, what do you call it? Like narration, where they're like,
Yes.
hey, there were some terms I had to kind of refresh myself on.
Yeah.
That is true. That I'm not saying it's a perfect game by any means. It is a good game.
Yeah.
And nobody told me that.
Yep. I was not expecting that, but it is true. It's severely underrated. This one might be one of the most underrated games. Well, maybe that's a little strong. It's up there. It literally lives in the shadow of Xenoblade Chronicles. There's actually 2 games that do, but this one even more so than the other. But both of these games are my next 2, so I'll just do them at the same time. The Last Story, and then more importantly, or more underrated, I should say, is Pandora's Tower.
Okay.
So I've talked a lot about Operation Rainfall in the past. If you're not aware of what that was, it was like a fan movement to try to get 3 Japanese games released outside of Japan in Western markets because they had no plans to do so. One was Xenoblade Chronicles. The second was The Last Story, Mistwalker, and Hironobu Sakaguchi's game.
Yeah.
And the third was Pandora's Tower. So it's a funny story, and I've seen some people sort of like challenge the way I've told this before. And so I'm going to clarify something real quick. Like, yes, these did get announced for European markets first, but that only made us more pissed because we were campaigning for them well before even that was announced. Right. So it was like, are these games coming outside of Japan? Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Then it was like, okay, we'll release them in Europe. Nintendo of Europe decided. And then all of us in America was like, why? Just give us that exact same freaking version. They're already translating into English over there. Just literally ship that over here. Why Nintendo of America? And then it like went into real overhaul at that point. That's where like the campaign really caught fire because it just seemed so dumb. Like they've literally done all the work. Just put the game on shelves here so we can buy it. That's when we got really pissed. So that's when it went into overdrive. Anyway, just want to clarify that. But really, though, I think like the vast majority of people who are like aligned with this cause, they just wanted Xenoblade.
That was the one that was,
Xenoblade sold by far the best and has spawned a huge franchise that has become extremely popular and has many, many sequels. And it deserves all of its success. I love Xenoblade. It is not overrated. It is perfectly rated.
It is just rated. Yes.
It's rated sufficiently. I really like it, and we're going to talk about the Xenoblade games in the future on our podcast. We've already done Xenogears and Xenosaga, so Xenoblade is next in that Xeno pantheon. We will get to it. However, The Last Story, while it also was a commercial success, lived in the shadow there a little bit of Xenoblade. It wasn't as successful and it wasn't as highly reviewed. I'm pretty certain Xenoblade was a 90 or a 91 or maybe even higher than that. And The Last Story was an 80, which is pretty low in my opinion. And then Pandora's Tower was like a 73. Oh, wow. It was really low in my opinion. And very, very few people, I think, actually bought that one. Okay. I don't want to say it was necessarily a failure commercially, but it certainly was not nearly the level of success of the other two, and certainly not the level of success of Xenoblade. But Pandora's Tower, I'll start with Last Story. The Last Story in particular, I remember looking at some of those reviews coming out, and literally some of these reviewers just totally misunderstood the game. They were complaining about the fact that the combat is sort of an action combat, but there's a lot of auto elements to it. Okay. So like you run up to an enemy and they just sort of auto attack almost in the style of like an MMO. Yeah. But you can change that.
Like Knights of the Old Republic.
In the menu. You just go in and you switch it and then you can make the A button be your attack button.
Okay.
But outside of that, it's a game about like managing your party members. Not like controlling them directly, but giving them commands.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit Mass Effect like in a certain sense, right?
Okay, cool.
Go over there, destroy that particular like piece of the environment that's a destructible thing that would give us an advantage. There's a bridge over here. Blow up that bridge and the guys, die, fall off it. You can tell the guys to catch magic, I need a heal. I need this, I need that, or attack this guy, or you can draw the enemies to you so that your squad members can have more time to not be interrupted with their spells. And so there's a little bit of like a tactical element to it. And so that would be a lot to manage as a real-time battle system. So I think that's why they initially, or by default, they make it so that you auto attack.
Okay.
And I think that was a mistake because a lot of people thought, oh, it's just an auto attacking game.
That's
I don't
just
like
how it
that.
is.
And it's not. You can switch it to where you do manually attack. So, probably a QR testing failure to a certain extent with that. But otherwise, I think it's a really good game. I mean, just as a Wii title, it's beautiful visually. I think its soundtrack is just incredible. It has a lot of really cool customization options. Like you can change like almost the color. It's almost like those old racing games that your brother used to be into, where you could literally just like move.
Yeah, it had the 256 1,000 color
range.
Yeah,
and you can just like get real particular with exactly the color you want. You can do that kind of with like the clothing and like the
Forza.
outfits for the
That was Parker loved Forza.
Yeah. So like
That's
you can really customize like the look of your squad. I think it has a really good solution for leveling up if you want to do that, if you feel under leveled or whatever. There's a lot of things it does that I think are really, really good. And on top of that, I think it has a really, I don't want to say like it's a story that succeeds on the same levels as the best of Final Fantasy, but it's certainly strong and it's got strong performances. And I think it's visually, in terms of art direction, really solid. I love like the concept art for the game. It's like some of my favorite concept art for this kind of style of RPG. I just love its concept art and its visual design. I think it's excellent. And of course the soundtrack is excellent. So that's the last story, which I think is great and certainly a lot better than an 8 out of 10 or much lower than that some people who didn't understand how the game worked gave it. But Pandora's Tower, I think, is the more underrated of the two. And conceptually, it's also really interesting to me. And visually, it's also kind of in a similar vein. It's got kind of it's not exactly the same, but it's in that same vein as far as like art direction. Like it's anime art style, we'll call it.
Yeah.
But the concept is there's this woman and like her either fiance or boyfriend or whatever. You play as the man in this relationship, but she's like singing at this festival, and then all of a sudden this curse starts taking effect. She starts changing into a monster. And so like you run away with her to like get her away from the authorities, like taking her and essentially like killing her or whatever, this curse that is taken over. But you're taken to this place in the world, even just like the world building is really cool. I think you'll like this a lot. So there's this literal like rift that they call the Scar. It's like a scar on the planet. And it's this like endless gulf, like this bottomless pit. And there's surrounding cliffs. In the center of this is this giant structure with 13 towers. And this is essentially where the game is played. You go through these 13 towers. It's like the levels of the game. And this little island where these towers are chained by 12 of these just like giant chains that sort of attach to.
So it's floating?
It's floating there in the center, but it's not only doing that, it's keeping the rift from continuing to open.
So it's a stitch.
And essentially consuming the whole world.
Oh, wow.
If this were allowed to have continued, the whole world would have been essentially destroyed by this opening rift.
Yeah.
So it's keeping the world together. So to speak, right?
Yeah.
So there's this whole lore about the gods.
That's pretty
sort
cool.
of like the original creation story, and even like the religion of this world. I think it's really well thought out in a way that is, again, not typically talked about when it comes to this game. That aspect of it, in terms of its world building and lore, is actually quite interesting and really good.
Cool.
And so you go to this tower, and your job is essentially to kill the beasts there, and take the beast flesh. And you have to feed that beast flesh to Elena, and she has to stave the curse by eating the beast flesh.
Interesting.
So it is literally just staving it.
Yeah.
So there's a whole aspect of the game where you go into the tower and there's a timer that starts counting down where the curse is advancing. And in
Okay.
order to stave it and reset it, you got to take beast flesh back to her and have her eat it.
That's cool.
And in their religion, they're like all like vegetarians. So like eating meat is considered this like horrendous, like evil thing.
Right.
And so not only does she have to eat meat, she has to eat this like beast, disgusting flesh in order to. So there's that whole aspect of it that
That's interesting.
there's almost like a body horror element to it, where like she's got these nasty monster tendrils growing out of her, and she's like, I can't eat this. This goes against like the teachings.
Right.
But it's like, do you want to? Okay, then just like turn into a monster, I guess. And so she has to like do that to survive, and she's so disgusted by it. And every time it's like she can barely stomach eating it, and you keep bringing her and forcing her to like consume this beast flesh.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's freaking crazy.
Yeah.
And then anyway, there's 13 what they call masters, which are I won't get into the whole lore of the world, but they're part of the creation story. And it's their flesh she needs to consume to like completely eliminate the curse. So you have to defeat those 13 bosses. It's got like a little bit of a Shadow of the Colossus vibe. Because you're taking this girl with you into this like forbidden land.
Yeah.
And you're like killing these giants. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this a little bit. Right, of an element to it, but it's the only way to save her.
So you're told. Yeah.
Yes. So it's got a little bit of that kind of feel to it.
Interesting.
But then there's this whole relationship aspect to the game where, you know, making sure that the curse doesn't advance enough, making sure that you're like doing optional dialogue with her, depending on how you treat her and how you go about helping her. It has like 7 different endings, this game.
You're selling me on this game.
It's really cool.
I've never had anyone explain Pandora's Tower to me before.
It's really cool.
This sounds like really, really cool.
It's a very cool game.
Wow.
On top of that, you kind of fight with like this chain, which is kind of using like the Wiimote, right? So you're like aiming it and sort of like hitting a specific spot and tearing off pieces of armor that then open up an enemy for attack, or, you know, so it's a really unique game. It's really cool, and it is never talked about. And it lives completely in the shadow of Xenoblade. And again, I love Xenoblade. I freaking love it. It's totally deserving of all of its success. But this game was also really good, and almost nobody who was a part of this movement to get these games ported actually even bought the game. Wow. They just wanted the other 2 ones.
Oh, man.
And I'm to blame for this too. I have talked all about many, many times how I was calling Nintendo of America every day on the phone. Hey, you're going to bring these games. Hey, you're going to bring these games. And I don't think I have ever actually publicly done a video on Pandora's Tower before. I don't know why, but I haven't. And it's actually really good. So it's super underrated.
It's so underrated that even you didn't like it.
Even
I'm just kidding.
I didn't talk about it enough.
There you go.
I liked it.
And you didn't rate it.
I didn't talk about it. I didn't rate it at all.
You didn't rate it, dude. Yeah, you're supposed to rate this stuff. You're supposed to rate everything.
So, Pandora, and it has a great soundtrack too.
Really?
That's another really underrated aspect of it, is it has an awesome soundtrack. Really good soundtrack. So play Pandora's Tower more. It's great.
I might. A lot of those Wii games are harder to
they're hard
experience.
To get. They're expensive now. Harder to come across for sure.
Do you have it?
I do.
Because I still have a Wii.
Yeah, I'll let you borrow it for sure.
Okay, sounds good, man. Sounds good. The next game for me it goes along the lines of that kind of, well, maybe more third-person shooter aspect. And it was this is a game that tried to do things very differently, and it didn't necessarily pay off for them, at least money-wise. I think the game is still highly reviewed, generally speaking. So I'm using the word now. I'm using the word to indicate a game that didn't sell as well as it should have, because y'all people slept on it. So this is Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh yeah, that's a good pick.
I think it's an underrated game because for the people in the genre to which this game was marketed, they didn't get it very well. A lot of people really just want to play a game where you go down there and just kill people, where you go to wherever you go to, wherever the place is, and you kill all the people of that place. And that is what most people who play these types of games. Maybe it's not exactly what they want. It's just more what they expect. This is how these games usually go. You go there, you kill 1,000 enemies, and then you rescue the president or whoever needs
the hero.
help.
The glorifying sort of like the soldier as heroic.
Yeah.
This is meant to deconstruct that whole concept.
Although I tell you, man, I don't know how to put this. Soldiers don't get that many kills. Like like being a soldier, even a soldier who has really been in the thick of it. Gosh, I've never asked a soldier how many people they've killed.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't do that anyway.
It's not considered polite. It's not considered polite. I do know that my uncle was a Navy SEAL in Vietnam, where he sustained multiple injuries and eventually was put behind a desk for the next 20 years in the Navy while he finished out his time there before he could retire, and he hated it. He was hardcore. He was he's actually suffering from dementia now. It's really sad. But he was the best of the best. And I never asked him that question. Nobody should. I'm just saying, I don't know how many people the common soldier kills. But my guess is it's something like 1 or 2. And even a hyper specialized soldier isn't doing what you're doing in these games. It's not Rambo, dude. Yeah. You're not just getting thousands of kills, right? unless you're like a technician and you're planting a bomb and it's on a bridge and then whatever. Okay, it's possible to get a high kill count like that, but not this way. Not like you're just boom, 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 boom. Yeah, every bullet, headshot.
Gunfights with thousands of people.
AI in games are stupid.
Headshot them all,
and you're headshotting them. Yeah,
that doesn't happen in the real.
It doesn't. And so people who have come to expect this of these games, now even in Spec Ops: The Line, you're racking up the crazy kill count. But my whole point is that people are playing these games for a reason. I want that power fantasy of going there and just like, doing the military thing. And Spec Ops: The Line kind of, gosh, I don't know how much to spoil here, but at the very least, you start questioning whether or not what you're doing is even the right thing to do at all. And that wasn't as well received, I think, as the game developers thought that it might be. Yeah. And so there are still other Spec Ops games. They're not like this. They're not like The Line. And so The Line, in my opinion, gets a little bit of it's overlooked in a lot of ways because it deals with the deep, deep questions of like, how do you know what's right? And even how do you know what's real? Right. That game is all about like, wait, what's even real or not? Where are we going? What is happening? And it explores things in some very deep ways, some very cool ways that I think military games would do well to explore more of, but that for sales reasons tend not to.
Yeah.
And so more of this, even though you don't get the money from it, and do it again, and you'll get another most underrated games video from us talking about that.
The most prestigious award there is.
But the most prestigious award ever. You won't make a ton of money, though, is the problem. So,
yeah. All right, my last one. This is a weird one to talk about. I'm not even sure where to begin. Half Minute Hero.
Oh, I remember that game. Yes.
This game is so good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This game is so good.
Oh my gosh, that takes me back.
So I have some really fond memories of this, particularly because of the time and the circumstances. So this is about 2009. So I had left Utah. My family lived in Utah. I came to live in Denver because you guys hooked me up with a job there.
Yeah.
I was trying to save money for college.
Right.
And so I was working 2 jobs. I was kind of 3, not actually 3 because it was 2 different employers, but 2 jobs within one. So I was driving shuttle, and I was valet parking, and I was selling furniture, and I was working from like literally 5 a.m. to like 10 p.m. every day.
Yeah.
Well, Monday through Friday. I did get weekends off, which was nice. So anyway, I was working a lot. I basically just worked all the time. But when I would drive shuttle, there were certain times I had to be over to the train station to pick people up and then drop them off. And they'd be busy for about an hour. And then my job was basically to just cruise around and find people who need a ride and just offer it to them.
Yeah, go to the edges of the parking lot and just see if anyone wanted to walk that far.
Just drive circles around the parking lot of this hospital and find people who might want or need a ride. So I didn't do that. I would just wait for people to call me, and I would go up into this higher level parking lot.
Yes, Conifer. Was it Conifer?
And the Conifer building,
Yeah, I remember
where
this.
you couldn't be seen.
Yeah, and yes, exactly.
And I
That's
would
where I would
bust
go.
out my PSP, and I would play games until someone called me and asked me for a ride.
Classic, dude. Classic.
And then after about 20 minutes, I would go do one round just in case anybody was looking.
Make sure your boss sees you.
Make sure they
wave
see
to
me
him.
doing something, and then I go back up there and play PSP some more, or DS or whatever I was playing. But this is in particular where I played a ton of Dissidia Final Fantasy.
Ah, yes, that's right.
And then
PSP.
Half Minute Hero was a game I played to death during those hours of working Drive and Shuttle. So if you haven't heard of Half Minute Hero, I really don't know how to explain it other than it being this absolutely hilarious sort of spoof on the tropes of RPGs. But it doesn't really play in too many ways like the typical turn-based RPG, though that is sort of the genre it's spoofing on a bit.
Yeah.
It's way funnier because you'll be like walking around the world map and you'll get into random battle, and you don't like sit there and go through menus and choose your attacks. Your guy, from one screen to the other, the enemy runs this way, your guy runs this way, and they just headbutt each other until one of them dies.
Yeah. That's classic, dude.
And it's just so funny. It's done in like this 8-bit pixel style. And the premise, at least for the hero mode, there's more than one mode. I basically didn't play anything other than hero mode. And I will explain more about why that's legitimate to this conversation in a minute. It's like the other, like most of the game, I didn't even really play. I just played hero mode, and that's
funny.
it. Because hero mode is so good. And it's basically the only mode anyone cared about. But the premise is that this spell, which essentially destroys the world in 30 seconds, has been leaked to all the Dark Lords. So like there's this wizard who's going around.
I love it, dude. I love
and like
the premise.
teaching the spell to kill everything, destroy the world in 30 seconds to all the Dark Lords around the world. And you're like chasing him, like stopping these Dark Lords from casting the spell. They always do, and that's the beginning of every levels. They've cast it, and now you have 30 seconds to defeat that enemy and stop the spell from being cast, right? So that's funny. Can't, right? 30 seconds is not enough because you have to level up enough to be able to actually beat the boss. Right. You can't just run to the boss and fight him. You're not leveled up enough to be able to, he'll just defeat you really easily. So you have to fight battles. You have to get gear. You have to do all the things you would do in an RPG to get strong enough to fight that boss, but you have to do it in 30 seconds. Now, there's a time goddess who, whenever you step into a town, will pause the time for you so that you can go and make your shopping selections and things like that. But as soon as you leave that town again, you got to like, okay, really fast, run over here, kill some guys, go back in. Okay, where am I at? Like, pause the time again. So you're managing time at the same time that you're trying to get strong enough so that when you run over to that castle and fight that boss, you'll be able to beat him really fast before the time runs out.
That's so good.
That is the whole premise, and each level is designed around that concept.
Yeah.
It's extremely fun. It's hilarious. There's this one that is my favorite in the whole game. The one of the Dark Lords that the wizard teaches the spell to is just this giant crab, and he's just mad because he can't move forward. It's like it's always sideways. I want to move forward, and he's just like pissed. It's like, I'm going to cast a spell. I'm going to destroy the world. This sucks.
Yeah,
like reasons like that. Right?
Yeah.
So it's very silly. It's very lighthearted, but it's always spoofing some of the more charming, kind of hilarious, weird things about this style of RPG. And that was my favorite mode. Now they have a couple of other modes. So that's the Hero 30 mode, which is 30 seconds. And then they have the Hero 300 mode, which is it's 300 seconds, but you can't stop the time. So it's like a little bit of a different twist on it.
Yeah.
And then they have the Hero 3 mode, which is you have 3 seconds, which is like that one you have to really use the stopping of time and the management things even more like judiciously or whatever, and the resetting and stuff like that. But they did have other modes. They had the Evil Lord mode, which was like a real-time strategy type game. Okay. So you're like summoning different types of units that you use to fight. I didn't really play these too much. There was kind of a rock, paper, scissors aspect to it.
Mm.
They had the Princess 30 mode, which is more of like a shoot 'em up type of game. And then they had the Knight 30 mode, which was more of an action game. So at first I was like, should I even really talk about this game where I didn't play like the majority of the modes that it had and I only focused on one? Well, here's a really funny thing. So when it was re-released, it was first released on Xbox Live Arcade as Half Minute Hero Super Mega Neo Climax.
That's funny, dude.
Yes. But that version basically took out all those other modes, not took them out, but changed them into Hero 30 mode just with the Dark Lord and the Princess and the Knight.
Oh, that's fun. Oh,
so
that's
that gave me I relaxed a little bit on the fact that I only cared about the hero mode, because apparently that's all anyone else cared about, to the point where they made the other modes just hero mode, but with other characters.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
So, they actually have a more recent re-release too on PC and Steam. And that version was called Half Minute Hero Super Mega Neo Climax Ultimate Boy.
That's funny.
I
who made this game?
It. So
Like,
it's
a Japanese
an obscure Japanese developer. Let's see what their name was.
This is I could guess that
Opus.
Opus, and they're from Japan.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The naming scheme of something like Super Mega Ultra is
that
Japanese, but
even
they're making
that is a spoof.
Yes, they're taking it even further.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they're spoofing like some of the just absurd names that a lot of these JRPGs have.
Right.
Just like what the heck, dude? Like these crazy names that they come up with. So
that's funny, man.
It's excellent game. I totally recommend it. But just know that if you want to play the original game's other modes, I think you basically have to get the PSP version for that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if they restored them in the newest release, but I'm pretty sure in the Super Neo Climax Ultimate versions that they just changed those modes into more Hero 30, but with other characters. But if you want to play in its original form, I recommend PSP if you can get your hands on it. That is my last underrated game for this list.
Well, my last one is one I really wasn't even going to put on here, and it kind of is more of an honorable mention in the category of underrated games, because it is not rated low, nor did it even sell poorly. It sold close to 5 million units, and it's rated highly. However, in the conversation including all of Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy IX does not get the respect it deserves. It did not sell as well as 8 or 7 or 10. It kind of, in the golden era of RPGs, Final Fantasy IX is the overlooked one, right? It's the one that maybe people don't like how it looks. Well, even into 2, though, with 10. Like, it's in a weird spot. From 6 to 12, 9 is the one that's like, what's that one doing there? That one's different. That one's different. And a lot of the people who really liked 6 and 7 and 8 and 10 and maybe even 12 didn't like 9 as much. And those are the people amongst whom 9 is underrated.
It's underrated.
This is a very narrow definition.
Very specific people.
Some very specific people.
The FF9 fans are going to love it.
Oh, well, guess what? FF9 is an underrated game. To have the developer, to have the creator of Final Fantasy have to step down after this game makes no sense. After making one of the best games ever is insane. I know that it's not why he'd step down. I know there's other factors at play here. He wasn't the best with money, and the movie really took his attention away from
what you're saying
video games.
It makes no sense that a guy can make a game this good.
And then 1 year later, it's like you're fired.
2-ish years later, they're gone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying.
That's wild. And like, what? At least have him make another one of those before you like sack the dude. You kidding me? Like 9 is what Final Fantasy was kind of born to be.
Yeah.
Right? It's
true.
The quintessential Final Fantasy game. It's the median.
That, in that respect, this is what Final Fantasy was meant to be in the mind of its creator.
Right.
Yet it was the least successful of that PlayStation era, in which those who didn't agree with that direction got the chance to take it a different direction.
Yes.
And that direction is what succeeded and what became more sort of like accepted as like the new direction for Final Fantasy. I think if you spin it and do enough mental gymnastics, you can find your way into
you can never do enough mental
justify
gymnastics.
it being an underrated game.
I really wasn't planning on talking about it much, but I figured I'd bring it up here because we just don't talk about 9 enough. As much as we talk about it,
Hey,
we don't talk about it enough.
I tell you what, we're going to be talking about it
I think we are
a lot really soon.
Possibly very soon.
Because spoiler alert for the current vote on Patreon, it is blowing away the vote.
so underrated.
So after, well, but to your point, it lost to Final Fantasy X.
Okay,
it lost
to
in the past to other games we put it up against.
Else. Yeah.
It lost multiple times.
Yeah.
So it has been up for vote for our podcast in the past a bunch of times and lost.
We had to really rig the polls to get it. I'm just kidding, people. We don't do that. We don't do that.
So after Terra Enigma, the chance is very likely that Final Fantasy IX will be the next game.
Very good. So. Hey, I am very pleased. Yeah. I shall air my grievances ere the year ends.
Anyway.
That's it. Those are the underrated games.
Our underrated picks. There's literally an endless list of great stuff you could pick. Why don't
so
you
much
give
more
me some of yours?
We can do another.
What's underrated in your mind?
Yeah, what do you think?
Okay, so here's another one that I was thinking about putting on my list.
Oh, I remember you talking about this. I never played it.
This is a Super Nintendo Squaresoft game that I don't think ever ended up getting released in the West. I think it was stuck in Japan. And that was another reason why I didn't put it on the list, actually, because I don't consider it being an underrated game necessarily in the sense that I'm coming at it from.
Yeah.
As much as it is, no one had a chance to play the thing in the first place. They can't rate it at all.
You know what? Instead of that's a good point. Instead of people giving us their most underrated games, give us your definition of underrated, because I think it's different for everybody, and I think that's one of the issues with the word.
What does underrated mean to you?
What does it mean to you? And which games apply? And which games do you still put in that word, even though it doesn't apply, but you do some nice mental gymnastics?
What mental gymnastics do you use to justify your definition?
That's what I really want to know.
Underrated.
I need to learn some new mental gymnastics.
All right, we got to go record our Metal Gear Solid episode now.
Yes, although I just thought of Bomberman 64.
That's a good one.
It's a really good game. And among Bomberman games, they never did one like that again. Those jerks.
Was it a big seller? I don't know.
I don't remember. I have no idea. I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure it was not rated very well. And every Bomberman game since has not been that.
Asura's Wrath, that's a game that I can get on board with you with. I think that's an underrated game. I really do. Very cool game. All right, we're going to go now. Peace out, everybody. Have a good one.